British Army in 2017 finds itself in uncharted territory. They've not been at war for 3 years.
Yeah, move!
After controversial campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's a political reluctance to put boots on the ground.
Afghanistan has taken a horrendous toll on our regiment. Absolutely horrendous. You'll struggle to find anyone who hasn't lost a friend.
There's also widespread opposition to military intervention. The Army's budgets are under increasing pressure.
They could go and manoeuvre without firing ammunition. It saves you 2 million of the 3.8 that you hope to save.
The British Army is smaller than it's been probably since Cromwell's day, and I would want to look myself very closely in the mirror if I felt that there was a risk of the army being sent to do something that it wasn't properly prepared to do.
But now, with the rise of the so-called Islamic State, the threat of a new Cold War in Eastern Europe, and famine and conflict in sub-Saharan Africa, the British Army have to play a new role in a deeply unstable world.
How many patients do you usually see a day?
700 to 800.
Filmed over 18 months, this series takes us into the heart of the British Army.
How many Russians are across the border? 100,000 odd? Yeah, a lot.
Through the eyes of the rank and file,
no one else has operated in Estonia before. This is completely different from Afghanistan and Iraq.
and the leaders.
General, how are you?
Good to see you. Very nice to see you too.
We see the challenges of fighting wars when we are not at war.
Days going out fighting the enemy such as ISIS for reasons above our pay grade. That doesn't happen anymore.
In this episode, the army returned to Iraq, where they have a bloody history.
We'll just search you.
About 3 weeks ago, we met a bloke that was fighting us in Basel, and because his family got killed by the British, that he decided to fight us. So I can see his side of the story as well.
Now they're helping the Iraqis defeat so-called Islamic State.
Since the Mosul battle started, how many vehicles have you managed to take damage from the front line, fix them and get them back up to the front line?
As the battle for Mosul begins, we are with the regiments operating behind the front line.
One of the Iraqis, his family was being held by Daesh, and they were threatening to hurt his family if he didn't shoot one of us. One of the ways we look at it is to be charming to every single person that we meet and work with, but to always have a plan to kill them.
Can the army face off their enemies, find lasting peace, and avoid being drawn into costly new wars? British soldiers from 1 Rifles regiment are in northern Iraq. They have just weeks to train a group of Kurdish recruits to fight the so-called Islamic State, known locally as Daesh.
1 platoon, listen in, listen to me.
25-year-old Lieutenant Jamie Robertson is on his first overseas operation.
Quite simply, the main aim is to train them to be able to defeat Daesh. It's definitely a very different tour for a lot of people, and particularly a lot of the guys that have been to Afghanistan before. It's taken a while to adjust.
Thanks very much, sir.
We train to fight. That's our bread and butter, that's what we do. So to then take that and pass it on to someone else and let them do the fighting definitely was strange, I think, initially for a lot of people.
Garwan, Adnan, Farha, Usman.
when the so-called Islamic State captured Mosul in 2014. Ibrahim Diab was a student. Now he is in charge of a new regiment called the Green Eagles. Many are civilians with little or no combat experience.
Do you think the urban stuff in the buildings, is that more useful than some of the countryside rural stuff we're doing?
زور بيت تسكيز الصحاوس مع الخان وكان شرادة سودية بيه؟ سودية بيه سودية تسرادة السوديان زور لي والقرطوا ديار بلنا بيشمر كان لنا خوان باز دكان كي بلي جوما اللي بلنا خوان درين أم تدريب والي كده خوما مبارزي زناينا كشتن.
This is probably the most likely formation you're going to use.
The Green Eagles are part of the Kurdish Peshmerga, a mixture of Christians, Kurds, and other Iraqi minorities.
So if you stand there.
All groups that have been brutally targeted by the so-called Islamic State.
Obviously, there's a lot of openings in an urban environment. If someone steps out with a machine gun, it can hurt a lot more people.
They're not always a regular force that have been trained before. They're taxi drivers, they're local farmers that on the weekends have volunteered to come out and fight. They might have owned an AK for the last 30 years, but never been taught how to use it properly. Taking someone that's got absolutely no experience and knowing in 5 or 10 weeks' time, they're going to be going to the front line and they're going to be fighting, and it's our responsibility to put them in the best stead for it. Yeah, that is challenging.
Let's keep the space in like that.
The Green Eagles need training, but no motivation to fight.
All the IDs are marked, so stop walking on glass and patrol like you normally would, okay?
In 2014, the so-called Islamic State, IS, swept across Iraq, seizing a third of the country. An international coalition, including Britain, targeted their strongholds with airstrikes, weakening their grip. But IS still controlled the city of Mosul, home to 1.5 million people. To defeat IS, Mosul must be liberated.
أبوي كنترول كنا وين موصل زور كن قبل أيام هو. تانا كسكر ما نشتغل معه فريانا كنت وراه. دواء ما كنت شن تأخير وما وكي كنترول كنا وهاي. نفريان زيادة من خوش تدبي. زيادة شهيدة دي. مخوم دو برام شهيدة واكم شهيدة.
دو برام لقى
وخالمش. يعني تنانت لا كنترول كنا يصير رجعكم تقريبا زيادة لبيس نفر ناس ياركو سكر وقسم تشتا.
Would you mind telling us how he lost his family members? Was that in the fighting?
تتواني بما بليتسون لنا وشربون يعني.
لا بعاود متستنى.
The headlines this morning. Iraqi forces have launched an offensive against fighters from the Islamic State group to recapture the city of Mosul.
At first light, the advance on so-called Islamic State. 0 hour had finally come, bringing an offensive that could decide the fate of the extremists and ultimately of Iraq itself.
يا أبناء شعبنا العزيز، يا أبناء محافظة نينوى الأحبة، قد دقت ساعة الانتصار وابتدأت عمليات تحرير الموصل.
With the battle for Mosul underway, General Jones, the deputy commander of an international coalition of 69 countries and the most senior British Army officer in Iraq, is traveling to ensure the Kurdish Green Eagles will be ready to fight.
All right, guys, great to see you. Thanks very much. Let's see you.
Everything with Daesh is done in a calculated manner. As the Iraqi security forces advance towards Mosul, Daesh calls that damage and destruction. The oil wells have been burning ever since. They know that smoke reduces the effectiveness of our surveillance and our strikes, makes our lives harder.
in Mosul, I can absolutely guarantee that today there'll be beheadings going on. There'll be people being thrown into burning oil pits. You know, this is a brutal, brutal regime. Liberating Mosul is a vital stage in the defeat of Daesh in Iraq. The hard yards in retaking Mosul is being done by the Iraqi security forces. We're not doing the fighting. We're here to support them with advice and then on the ground provide them with air support and surveillance. Shape the battlefield, set the conditions for the Iraqis when they attack, identifying enemy positions in advance and striking them. It might take a little longer than it might if we were doing it, but it lays the ground for a far more lasting solution because they're the ones who've liberated their country. And I think that's very powerful for the future. Come on, Jamie, how are you? All okay?
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, and you? What's happening?
So what we've got, this is one of the platoons here which is going through defence lessons.
Yeah.
See what's going on. They kind of go for a more medieval style of this is our
Defend the
castle,
fort.
hold the walls and hunker in. What they initially did was just line everyone on this berm. So we're trying to teach them that if you can stop them further ahead and have this the last line, it's that buffer, it creates time, creates space.
Absolutely. And what level of experience have these guys got?
It's a big mixture.
The role of the British Army is very different to the last time they were here. When Allied forces overthrew Saddam Hussein in 2003, they were initially welcomed as liberators. But liberators quickly became occupiers, and the Iraqi population turned against them. 179 British soldiers were killed in action. Iraq has been torn apart by sectarian violence since, a situation IS has exploited.
The British military, I think it's fair to say, would feel they've got some unfinished business. I think there was probably a degree of frustration as to the outcome. Was it nested to the very best political strategy? That's for others to comment on. I guess what I would say is that because of the way this campaign has been fought, I would hope that the government of Iraq and the Iraqi security forces will have a kind of credibility, an authority that wasn't there previously. Jamie, thank you very much. I'll see you later on. Thank you.
This new role for the British Army leaves them in an uncertain position against an enemy who has a hatred of the West. A week into the battle for Mosul, IS launched numerous attacks in towns across Iraq.
هذه آليات المرتدين هذه آلياتهم بإذن الله عز وجل إلى مقابرهم.
One attack is in Al-Anbar province, western Iraq. The region was once a base for Al-Qaeda. Now it's a stronghold for IS. "250 British soldiers from 4 Rifles Regiment have been sent here to protect a strategically important Iraqi airbase at Al-Assad."
The route we're going to take is we're just going to dismount, we're going to walk through the abandoned shoes all the way along, through the running track down by the cinema, and drop down into the IF Sec 4 HQ.
Baldy, that's clear, mate. That's us clear of you. Yeah, so you can move forward if you want.
During the last Iraq War, thousands of American troops were stationed at Al-Assad.
It had a nickname called Camp Cupcake because it had all the
sort of all the luxuries that you get back home. So for the Americans, it was actually a really good posting, but it's obviously not like that anymore. As you can see, there's an outdoor swimming pool. Up further down there, there's like a stadium with an athletics track. There's all sorts of stuff here, really. It would have been nice to have that now, especially in the summer with a swimming pool.
The base covers 25 square miles. Its size makes it difficult to defend.
The main thing for us is to keep vigilant, to not let yourself get lax and not let your guard down.
Lance Corporal Steve Smith fought against the Taliban in Afghanistan. But the British Army's role here is very different. They can't leave the base or actively seek out the enemy.
Once Mosul's done, the question we've really got to ask ourselves is what are Daesh going to look at doing next? Are they going to look at infiltrating more into this area? Are they going to become more of a small insurgency in different towns? Assalamu alaikum. It's easy to identify a uniformed enemy, but the minute they stop becoming uniformed and start fitting in with the local population, that's when it's a trickier task.
Before 4 Rifles arrived, Al-Assad was under constant attack from IS.
Hello! Hello!
They infiltrated and I believe they sort of moved around the buildings, and that's why we're doing patrols like this, is to monitor to get used to what buildings are in use, and then when buildings start getting used again, we can start asking why.
Hundreds of Iraqi National Army soldiers are stationed at Al-Assad. Their job is to cut the flow of IS fighters crossing the Syrian border 100 miles away and joining the fight in Mosul. The coalition has brought in heavy artillery and state-of-the-art surveillance equipment to protect the Iraqi army.
Belt-fed weapon, 4-round burst, supposedly high caliber, so the only ones that could be a PKM or a Dushka, and 5.900 mils from Sanger 3.
There's now no freedom of movement through that corridor from the south, from the north, anywhere down towards Baghdad or up towards Mosul without us being able to get eyes on it. The idea being that we now constrict them and then push them into a single location and push them back towards the Syrian border, clearing Iraq of all Daesh activity and fighters.
Any kind of movement?
We're still in a hostile environment where anything can happen, so things can change, you know, in a snap of the fingers. So all the guys just need to be ready.
General Jones oversees the coalition's strategy to liberate Mosul.
Okay, team. Hi, team. Who's briefing?
7 weeks into the battle, Iraqi forces are now fighting inside the east of the city.
Biggest progress of the day is on the Gwar axis.
Yeah.
You had forces that were right here, had a foothold secured in the southeastern portion of Mosul.
Any other developments that I need?
So there's been a number of V-bits. I've seen about 8 today. One was up on CTS forces, the others were focused on the advancing forces in the south.
So that advance to the hospital had 7 V-bids against it?
Yes, sir.
Vehicles they use for these assaults, brutal weapon. The Iraqi security forces are pretty terrified of them. Daesh's industry of war is on a very significant scale, and it requires explosives on a very large scale. Very well fabricated platforms, perfectly designed for the job they're there for, which is to get an explosive device at speed down in amongst the Iraqi security forces.
IS have launched over 200 VB IED attacks in the first 51 days of the battle for Mosul, killing thousands of Iraqi soldiers. Unlike past campaigns, General Jones can't put coalition troops on the ground to solve the problem. He's flying to the Iraqi Army Forward Operating Base, south of Mosul, and must find another way to help stop the heavy death toll of Iraqi soldiers.
I guess I understand better than most people the true cost of war. My father was killed in the Falklands War, commanding a parachute battalion in the Battle of Goose Green, then was awarded the Victoria Cross for his troubles. I undoubtedly feel motivated by the values he stood for. The world's changed enormously since 1982, but I quite regularly in my professional career refer to him and in my mind what he might have done in a set of circumstances.
The Iraqi security forces, as they press into Mosul, are taking pretty heavy attrition in terms of their vehicles. And as Daesh throws suicide vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices at them, a lot of the vehicles are getting damaged and destroyed. And if we're going to keep the Iraqis in the fight, we need to repair their vehicles, we need to get them fresh vehicles.
And they'll just download here and then migrate the equipment over, and the tracked vehicles all get worked on just right out in the open, sir.
Very temporary.
Yeah.
A quarter of the Iraqi army's vehicles have now been destroyed by IS. General Jones fears the offensive to take back Mosul could be in serious trouble.
Aha! General, how are you?
Good to see you.
Very nice to see you too. How are you?
General Hassan al-Maliki is in charge of logistics support for the Iraqi army in Mosul.
How does a brokered vehicle get from the front line back to here? If a Humvee needs a new tyre, do you send the tyre forward? Does the vehicle come back here? How does it work? Since the Mosul battle started, how many vehicles have you managed to take damage from the front line back to Taji, fix them and get them back up to the front line? That's the bit that we've got to try and work on, is see how we can get some of these battle-damaged vehicles back forward faster.
The coalition has spent over $550 million arming and training the Iraqi army. But even General Jones cannot control how they choose to deploy their resources.
You know, it had that air of almost being there for demonstration purposes. You know, so people were lined up to kind of almost show us what great work they were doing, but there was kind of no real evidence of work going on. Is that fair?
That's kind of the way that the Iraqis operate.
There's less investment going on here than I thought there was.
The next day, General Jones calls a crisis meeting with Iraqi and coalition generals. He must convince the Iraqis to improve their military planning.
Very nice, you sound like.
Else the battle for Mosul could fail.
I think the vehicles that we really want to focus on today are probably Humvees, because I think those are the key vehicle for the fight for Mosul. We are now using vehicles that we were keeping for after the Battle of Mosul.
So at the beginning of a battle, we move at the speed of the fighter, but very soon we start moving at the speed of logistics, and we're at that point right now. So we're very interested in what the plan is to recover the damaged vehicles, then repair them, and then return them.
والعطل الموجود تقريبا 50 عطل. المواد الاحتياطية هم اكو عطل بي يقترب من السنتين. يأمنون مواد احتياطية ما يأمنون. يتعذرون انه المصدر التصنيعي ما عنده هاي المادة او يتأخر او الروتين مالتهم. فاحنا ما نعرف الآلية شلون هذه مثلا نسرع في تأمين هذه المواد.
I think what we need to try and help you with is, as the vehicles come back down, the ones that are really, really badly damaged, leave them to the back of the queue. We take the ones that are battle damaged, that can be fixed and can be got back into the fight in a matter of days. Those are the ones where I would advise we should be putting our effort.
The speed of logistics has to catch up to the speed of the fighter right now. And really the momentum in Mosul will depend on how quickly we can turn out, particularly Humvees from the 3rd and the 4th line.
We always knew that Mosul would be a tough fight. It is a tough fight. I would say Daesh are fighting harder than they've ever fought before. And they're not giving up easily. What we've then got to try and do is help coach them, help them refine their tactics, and then also look at how we keep the Iraqi security forces in the fight. Any military only succeeds because of its logistics, and we need to make sure the logistics, the sustainment is there, so the Iraqis can keep up the fight all the way through Mosul. Thank you very much. Shukran. Thank you very much. I think reasonably positive. Small steps.
You've had the intelligence that a suspect or a vehicle that needs to be searched, someone suspicious, is going to be passing through this location. All these stones, all these represent is a road. You don't need to make sure that all your section, however many blokes it is, are not fixated on that vehicle, because that could be just a come on and you could have enemy anywhere around this area here.
On the ground in northern Iraq, IS's VB IEDs are striking fear into the Green Eagles.
This is the most dangerous threat that the Peshmerga face. They're invariably very difficult to destroy and incredibly effective and quite simple to make. And this one's a Ford F-150 truck. They just stick a load of armour plating on the front and then fill the back with explosives and then just drive head on into the Peshmerga with a guy in the front that's ready to give his life. This is quite a small one. We get asked a lot by the Pesh, how do we try and take these on? The main thing that we try and do, because as you can see, the armour on the front, this is where the whole focus is. So it's about making the vehicle turn to expose the softer rears. Always try and make chicanes that they have to manoeuvre around to expose the vulnerable points. But this really is what strikes fear into the Peshmerga the most, and quite rightly so. It's a very crude, very effective tool against them and hard to stop.
British military tactics only go so far. IS has an army of volunteers ready to drive the VB IEDs. As part of their propaganda, they post the selection process online.
That was genuine happiness that he gets to be the next suicide bomber. It's a hard mindset to try and understand. The best way to try and work out how someone fights to counter it is try and put yourself in their shoes. But obviously it's very difficult from our point of view to try and get into that mindset. Daesh have absolutely no regard for preservation of life, and us in the British Army and the Peshmerga here, that's fundamental to everything we do. We're fighting to protect life.
كزان أمدا عشان كبين يعني إخوانا كبين هسه كردستان كنترول بكنوا من عليا كوجن نعم كشتنا عقلي خرابة بو هم كرد الدنيا يا شتيكي زور قرين كلمة شركة.
Ibrahim and the Green Eagles will be sent to the front line in a matter of weeks.
Can you raise your hand if you have a weapon with you that you can bring to training tomorrow?
The coalition has supplied the Peshmerga with guns and ammunition, but all resources are now being used inside Mosul.
When we first started the training this week, about 80% of them had an AK-47 with them, but that number has dropped off now. And what we found is that whichever member of the family needs it the most that day, because they go to the front line, they'll take that weapon with them. So we've gone from 80% weapons to about 20 to 30 now, which makes obviously training quite difficult.
يترفعوا جدا يا أبو كنترول كرناوي موصل وباراستين دواي كنترول كرناوي خونا كان بوسو بقارنوا ناو مالو كسكاير كخومانو سرخانو عرفو مش تاني.
The British Army is walking a political tightrope in helping both the Kurdish Peshmerga and the Iraqi National Army. The Kurds want Mosul to be part of an independent Kurdish state. Their plan is vehemently opposed by the Iraqi government.
Do you ever fear that trained all these different parts of Iraqi society, that what could happen in the future could be detrimental?
Yeah, so I mean, there's an argument that says liberating a town or city is the easy part. Easy being relative, you know, it's a tough fight, but you know what you've got to do. You've got to fight your way through the town and the city. The greater challenge that the government of Iraq has is what follows. What the international community has got to help Baghdad with is after Daesh is defeated, how you draw society together, reconciling communities will be a great challenge.
At Al-Assad, there have been fresh suicide attacks near the base.
Okay, so an update to the enemy picture. Significant events. So they've received 2 incidents of incoming. One coming from Haditha, which is approximately here, and another coming from Sagra. Again, what that's showing is Daesh's will to continue fighting. They're willing to hold that ground and fight for that ground. Of note is 2 suicide bombers that struck ISIL positions along Highway 19. Essentially, one of them was killed before he could detonate his vest, and the other successfully detonated. 2 friendly KIAs and 2 friendly wounded.
BDOC, India 10 Alpha, permission to enter friendly lines 2 by 11, over.
25-year-old Lieutenant Pete Enriquez is observing a US Marine mortar team on the outer perimeter.
India 10 Alpha.
In the last attack on Al-Assad, IS infiltrated the base, sneaking through the riverbeds. The Americans are taking offensive action to prevent another attack.
Oh, stop, fire!
It goes to show how determined these people are. Crawling in 5 days on your belt buckle, on your chest is, I mean, that's pretty grim. We do a fair old bit of crawling, but I can't possibly imagine doing it for 5 days. By firing the mortars, it sends that clear warning that, yeah, we know what you're up to, we know what routes you take in. It's a pretty aggressive deterrent to Daesh that if they want to try it again, look, we're here, we're not afraid to shoot, come get it if you really want, sort of thing.
Give them some run behind us. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
We signed up to the infantry, we signed up to the army because we wanted to pick up a rifle and get directly involved. having to answer the hard questions that the riflemen are asking because they're intelligent guys, having to put a positive spin on why they can't necessarily go out into the area outside of Al Assad Air Base when they'd like to. So it is frustrating. It's an entirely different type of warfighting.
Morning. Shalom.
Assalamu alaikum.
Lance Corporal Smith and Rifleman Cocaine manned checkpoints to search Iraqi civilians who work on the base.
Morning.
IS could recruit one of them to launch a suicide attack.
We're just looking for any signs that would indicate someone is not normal.
It's cold, isn't it?
If someone isn't welcoming, there's got to be a reason why. The best way to look at it is someone that's about to have a fight, someone that wants to cause trouble. They don't tend to be part of the group, they tend to be just on that outside, being a bit itchy, being a bit twitchy, and basically getting ready to strike. Someone that's going to cause an insider threat is usually the same.
Yes, it's the AND workers, so literally 5 through to 11, over.
They're just like people back home. They're friendly enough. I don't really have a problem with them.
I like them, they've got good banter.
Full Rifle's role is a delicate balancing act.
As long as we're here helping them, they're going to be on our side. The minute we stop helping them, or the minute we do something wrong, is when they'll switch and turn against us.
At the end of the day, this is their country. We're coming here while we're trying to help them. You've got to show them respect and not treat them like second-class human beings. Just maybe the mistakes that other coalitions have made in the past. So that's a big emphasis, is treating them with the proper respect that they deserve.
And if all else fails, just say Manchester United, they love it.
Love it.
Full Rifles are also training hundreds of soldiers from the Iraqi National Army at Al Assad. In an area of widespread support for IS, this poses a higher level of threat than working with the Kurdish Peshmerga. Full Rifles have intelligence that IS are trying to blackmail and turn some of the Iraqi soldiers against them.
Okay, then, salam alaikum. It's me, Woody. And today I'm going to teach you how to search routes.
As a guardian angel, my particular job is to observe the Iraqis who are under training, just to make sure that they're not going to pose any threat to the British or coalition chaps who are delivering that training.
We have 3 types of IEDs. Can anyone name them?
Captain Tom Legg is the first line of defense against an insider threat.
Probably the main threat that we face from the Iraqis is actually one of them being coerced. So, for example, we've already had a situation where one of the Iraqis, his family was being held by Daesh, and they were threatening to hurt his family if he didn't shoot one of us.
At this point, the rear man will work his way searching up the road. He'll reach the marks and he'll make his own mark.
I don't think anyone likes the idea that somebody that you could have